guys, and welcome back to another Freaky Friday video on my channel. I'm actually starting a trend here because in all of my latest videos I am wearing an oversized hoodie. It is absolutely freezing out, so for the rest of the winter in these videos I'm probably going to be wearing something similar to this. Not that that matters, I just thought it was kind of funny that for the last few videos I have been wearing an oversized hoodie. But anyways, today I am back with another cryptid video and I'm super excited for this one, so let's get right into it. Actually, before we really get into today's case, I do feel like I just have to say there are so many cryptids that come out of West Virginia that it really started to make me wonder if there is possibly something going on over there or something in the water that is making these animals or people morph into these strange creatures. But anyways, the cryptid that we are going to be talking about today comes from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and it is actually my favorite cryptid of all time. So today we are going to be talking about Mothman. The first documented sighting of Mothman took place on November 12, 1966 in Clendenin, West Virginia. A gravedigger was actually in the cemetery one night working very late when all of a sudden he noticed above his head was what he described as a human-looking creature that was like brown, and it was quite large, and it was flying very low above his head, moving from tree to tree within the cemetery. Now, I don't really know too much about the aftermath of this incident. I'm going to assume that the gravedigger probably freaked out and left for the night, at least I would have. But unfortunately, we don't know too much about the aftermath of this incident, but I'm going to assume that the guy was pretty much terrified. And just 3 days later, on November 15th, there was two married couples, meaning 4 people, driving near Point Pleasant when they saw what they described as a huge human-looking creature standing in the middle of the road. Now, they said that you could tell immediately that this creature was not human. They estimated that it stood from 6 to 7 feet tall, and it had huge wings on its back. They said that at first, when the creature noticed the car, it began to chase it on foot, and all 4 of the people described that when the creature was chasing them on foot, it appeared to be a little bit clumsy. But eventually, the creature took off into flight, and when it was flying, it did this extremely coordinatedly and very quickly. The group decided after encountering this creature that they were going to drive straight to the Point Pleasant police station. Once they arrived at the police station, they told the deputy sheriff about this bird-like creature that had chased their car. And they said that this creature actually continued to chase their car until they reached the city limits, and then it kind of just flew away. It didn't really bother with them anymore. But that actually isn't the only sighting of this creature that happened on the night of November 15th. Around 10:30 p.m. on that same night, Newell Patridge, who was actually living in Salem, which is about 90 miles outside of Point Pleasant, said that he was just sitting in his house watching TV when all of a sudden the TV screen went completely black. And before he had time to even think about what was going on, a strange pattern actually appeared on the TV. And just as quickly as that had happened, he started to hear a strange whining, screaming-like sound coming from outside of his home. Now, he actually described this whining, screaming sound as sounding similar to when you turn a generator on. After this, Newell actually continued to just kind of sit there shocked about what was going on until he heard his dog on the front porch barking outside into the darkness. When he walked outside, he had actually noticed that his dog wasn't barking into the darkness, but was adamantly barking at the barn that was located on the property. After noticing this, Newell walked over to the direction where his dog was barking to kind of see what was up, see if maybe somebody was hiding in the barn, and that is when he noticed that there was actually a very scary looking creature hiding in his barn that had red glowing eyes. Now, I believe that Newell was a hunter. He was a very familiar with lots of different animals, and he said that these eyes did not resemble any of the animals that he had been aware of. He said that they didn't look like animal eyes at all, and they definitely 100% were not human. At this point, Newell ran back inside to gather his rifle. He tried to get his dog to come inside with him, but the dog would not and insisted on chasing this strange creature into the woods. Newell didn't know what to do. He was absolutely terrified, as I assume all of us would be, and he actually ended up sleeping, sitting in his chair that night with his rifle in hand. And unfortunately, his dog never returned home. Something about this that I found very interesting, but also extremely sad for Newell, is a couple days later when he was reading the local paper, he actually saw an interview or a written statement from the two couples that had seen the creature driving that night, And in this statement, they'd actually said that when they were driving closer to Salem, they noticed what appeared to be a very large dog on the side of the road. Now, this is when that creature was still chasing their car, so they got absolutely horrified, and I'm not really sure how it ended up, but they ended up just doing a big circle, and by the time they got back, the creature had actually disappeared for a few moments and the dog was gone. So they assumed that the creature that was chasing their vehicle had gotten this dog. Because there had now been 3 total sightings of this strange creature, people were absolutely freaking out. So on November 16th, there was actually a press conference held just to talk about what was going on and to warn people about this creature. At this time is when he was dubbed Mothman. And after this came out and they started to talk about it, news of Mothman was printed in almost every single paper at that time, and Mothman was quickly known worldwide. Something that I failed to mention earlier on in this video, but is quite important to this case, is that the area where the couples had actually seen Mothman was very, very close to an abandoned TNT plant. Now, it is assumed at this point, after talking about this and having the press conference, that Mothman was actually living within the TNT plant. And after reading about this, it does sound like this would be a very, very good place for Mothman to kind of lay out, because this was an abandoned place. Not very many people would go there because of how dangerous it was. It just wasn't a place that was often visited by absolutely anybody. There wasn't very many houses near there. Very many people didn't live in the same area as the TNT plant. There was a few people who lived in that area, but there wasn't many. So the area was pretty secluded and pretty much just abandoned all the time. There was usually never anybody there. And the next situation that I'm going to be talking about with Mothman is actually by a woman who claimed to have multiple incidences with Mothman. And before deciding to dive into Mothman himself and doing a whole entire video on him, I was actually going to do an entire video just on this one woman, but I decided to do a video on Mothman first, so here we are. But yeah, so I'm going to tell you guys that incident right now. So like I mentioned, the area where the TNT plant was extremely isolated, and there wasn't very many people who lived in that area, but there was a few families who didn't abandon their homes when the TNT plant became evacuated and it became abandoned. And so there was still a couple households in that area where people did live. So the Thomas family was one of those families who lived in a home very, very close to the TNT plant. Now, on this particular night, they were having somewhat of a dinner party. They had Mrs. and Mr. Wamsley over, as well as Marcella Bennett and her infant daughter, Tina. Now, at some point during that night during dinner, the group actually noticed a bunch of strange red lights hovering above the TNT plant. And later on in an interview, they would say that they were 100% positive that these lights didn't belong to any airplanes or anything like that. They were just something that they hadn't seen before and they couldn't identify. I failed to mention that this incident actually took place on November 16th. So on that night, November 16th, around 9 p.m., they had finished with the dinner party, and Mr. and Mrs. Wamsley, as well as Marcella and her infant daughter, were leaving the Thomas home. And once they got outside, they actually noticed a very large and scary creature kind of hiding behind their parked vehicles. They described this creature as being huge and gray and having glowing red eyes. Marcella was actually so scared and frightened by this creature that in her fear, she actually ended up dropping her infant daughter and falling to the ground to duck for cover. Now, at this point, Mr. Wamsley actually really worked very, very quickly in this situation. He picked up the infant daughter and gathered the group quickly back into the Thomases' home so that they could be safe from whatever this creature was. Once they got inside, Mr. Wamsley actually moved quite quickly to phone the police. But obviously, once the police arrived, the creature was gone. But actually, once the group had gotten into the home before the police had arrived, they said that this strange, scary creature was actually now on the porch watching them through the house windows. Marcella, unlike the others, had an extremely difficult time dealing with what she had seen. So bad to the point that she actually had to seek medical attention. She continued to have severe nightmares about this creature for many, many years after the incident, and later would claim that she believed that Mothman had visited her home in Point Pleasant on many, many different occasions after this incident. And after encountering Mothman, Marcella actually had a lot of bad luck for many years following even the first encounter. And a lot of people do believe that this was due to her interaction with Mothman. For the next year, from November of 1966 to December of 1967, hundreds of reported sightings would come into the local paper as well as the police station about people who had similar encounters to these ones with what people were now calling Mothman. Mothman is described as being a bipedal humanoid that stands at about 7 feet tall and is estimated to fly at about 100 miles per hour. He is usually seen as being either a very dark gray color or black, and is always said to have red glowing eyes, but is sometimes said to not have a head and that his eyes are actually located on his chest. Anyone who has had an encounter with Mothman is said to obviously suffer from extreme fear, but it is also said that a lot of the people who came into contact with Mothman suffered from a lot of psychological distress, leading anywhere from a few months to a few years. Also, a lot of people who come into contact with Mothman are said to have very, very bad luck for the following years within their life. And many of the people who had first-hand encounters with Mothman said that they could feel a sense of pure evil as soon as he comes within even a far distance of you. Now, obviously there was many other reported sightings and interactions with Mothman between the year span of November of 1966 to the November of 1967, but I won't be sharing all of those here today. But something that I found to be very, very strange is a lot of the people who said that they had encounters with Mothman also claimed that they had been visited by the Men in Black. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Men in Black are, you probably think that I'm making a very lame movie reference, but I am not. So I am going to touch base briefly on what the Men in Black are and what they represent, but I don't want to dive too deeply into them because I do plan on making a video specifically on these Men in Black later on in the future. But basically, the Men in Black usually travel in pairs of twos and are usually seen after a strange occurrence happens, usually involving aliens. And what they do, or what they represent, when they show up, they basically try to deter the witness from sharing any of their information by threatening them, so as to keep them hush-hush so that whatever they had seen or witnessed doesn't get out to the public. And again, a lot of the people who had first-hand encounters with Mothman do claim that they were afterwards visited by these Men in Black. By November of 1967, the Mothman sightings and encounters seemed to dive down quite significantly. Now, some were still coming in here and there to the newspapers and the police station, but there wasn't nearly as many as there had been earlier on in the year. That was until December 15th of 1967. The Point Pleasant Silver Bridge that actually connected Point Pleasant to Ohio was absolutely packed at this time. It was around 5 p.m. and not only was the bridge packed with people coming home from work and whatnot, but again, December is one of the busiest times of the year for almost absolutely everybody. So the bridge was extra packed with people probably going to Christmas parties, Christmas shopping, doing things to prepare for the holidays. It was just absolutely so full. That is when all of a sudden, without warning, the bridge just absolutely collapsed, causing all of the vehicles that were on the bridge at that time to fall into the dark waters of the Ohio River. This bridge collapsing caused the death of 46 people, and 2 of those people's bodies have never been recovered. But the other 44 people whose bodies have been discovered are all buried together in a cemetery in Ohio. To make things even eerier, on that same night, around the same time when the bridge collapsed, one of the families who did remain living in the area close to the TNT plant, which is where Mothman is speculated to believe to have lived, they actually reported seeing at least 12 very bright and red strange lights hovering over their home before they just completely vanished into the woods, and they never ever saw them ever again after this night. And the following days after the tragedy of the bridge collapsing, many people came forward to both the local paper as well as the police station, reporting to have seen Mothman near the bridge minutes before it collapsed. And in 1975, the book The Mothman Prophecies, written by John Keel, came out, and it actually covers a broader spectrum of all of the strange things that had been happening in Point Pleasant at that time. And it does suggest that there was something supernatural at work at this time when the bridge did collapse. Of course, though, like any case similar to this one, the professional investigators, I'm meaning police officers and things like that, who looked into this case, do blame the construction of the bridge. They say that the bridge was poorly manufactured and the amount of cars on the bridge that day, again, was excessive, and that is why the bridge collapsed, and that it actually has nothing to do with Mothman. Since this time, Mothman has actually been linked to 2 other cryptids. One of these cryptids is the giant thunderbird. Now, the giant thunderbird is said to have a red head and gray body, and it was actually spotted a few times in the same area around the same time that Mothman was being seen. So again, that is just going back to all of the strange cryptids that do come out of this general area of West Virginia. And the next cryptid that Mothman has often been linked to is that of Owlman, which is pretty much an identical cryptid to Mothman, but it was actually seen in Cornwall, England in 1976. But besides that, these 2 cryptids are almost pretty much identical. Now, those are the 2 that I've seen often online, Mothman being compared to, but something that I just can't help but notice is I am not only super into Mothman, I am also super into the Flatwoods Monster, which also comes from West Virginia. And after looking at both of these cryptids, I cannot help but notice the similarities between the 2. They are just absolutely striking and make you think maybe they could be related. Maybe they aren't the exact same thing, but the likelihood of one of them being a different version of the other, I feel like, is a possibility. Now, I actually did do a video on the Flatwood Monster quite a long time ago when I first started YouTube, but I will have that linked below in case you guys want to check that out. But that is also another cryptid that I'm super into, and I feel like these 2 are just so strikingly similar. In 2002, in the 3rd weekend of every September, they now hold a Mothman festival since 2002. This is just your typical festival. There is live music, food vendors, there's live speakers who come to talk about Mothman. It's just your typical festival. You go, you drink, you eat, you have fun, you listen to music, and it's all to represent Mothman. Also in the same general area, there is actually a Mothman museum as well as a statue of Mothman. Over the years, Mothman has become the inspiration for many TV shows and video games and books and other monsters and things like that, because Mothman is just such a popular cryptid. He is almost as popular as Bigfoot, although I don't personally think that he is that big, but he's getting there. Mothman is definitely, again, my favorite cryptid. I think that this is so interesting how he was seen so frequently for that span of time and then all of a sudden just vanished and was never seen again. That is just mind-boggling. Like, why was he there and where did he go after he vanished? It's just so fascinating to me. This one is just so interesting. I think the reason that I'm so interested in Mothman is because there are so many other creatures that have been seen all over the world that look strikingly similar to Mothman that people have reported encounters with. So it almost makes you think, like, what is this? Like, could it be an alien? Could it be a creature that we're unaware of at this point? Like, what is it? Where did it come from? And what is the explanation for what they are? But guys, that brings us to the end of this video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!